Four men, three matches, two titles, one undisputed champion. This, my friends, is my December pay-per-view review. WWF Vengeance 2001. As I am your Digital Super Saiyan 3 back here with this video. Anyway, this show took place December 9th, 2001 in San Diego, California at the San Diego Sports Arena, called by good old JR Jim Ross and the returning Jerry the King Lawler as he returned to the World Wrestling Federation. So, the 2001 Vengeance pay-per-view. We start off with Vince McMahon coming out, because this is following up the SmackDown where Vince McMahon got stink-faced by Rikishi after The Rock shoved Vince McMahon's face up Rikishi's ass. And yes, Vince is cutting a promo. He's talking about he who laughs last laughs loudest. And then his new partner, Ric Flair, comes out. And yes, this was during the time then that Ric Flair was revealed to be the mysterious consortium that Shane and Stephanie gave their stock to. Basically, Vince's new business partner and co-owner of the World Wrestling Federation. So now, Ric Flair says, hey, we got a show to start, and it starts now. And then we get into our first match, which was a tag team match, as Scotty 2 Hotty and Albert defeat the team of the European champion Christian and Test. This was alright, I guess. I mean, this would eventually lead into... Christian and Test would later form the Un-Americans in 02, but this was just, this was just setting the groundwork for what we would see with the Un-Americans in 02. But, this was not a fancy match or anything. It was just okay. Albert and Scotty won the match, so it was just what it was. Next up, we get a promo from William Regal, where he is challenging the Intercontinental Champion Edge for Edge's Intercontinental Championship. And he's getting talked about his tactics. And he's basically arguing with Jonathan Coachman about his tactics. And Regal says, listen, Sonny, my tactics have led me to great success. And, of course, this was also after William had joined the Kiss My Ass Club, but I'm not going to get into that boat. Now we get into Edge and William Regal, and they had a solid match for the IC title. Not one of the greatest IC title match, but it was a very solid one. Like, Edge won, he retained. Like, William tried to go for the brass knucks. He's tried to hit Edge with the brass knucks, but Edge hits the spear on William Regal, and he retains the Intercontinental Championship. So, Edge winning, Edge winning was definitely a major bonus, so I'm not going to really flack this match so much, but it was a solid match nonetheless. Not the best match for the IC title, but it was a solid match. But next up we get Lita, who is being the special guest referee in Matt Hardy versus Jeff Hardy. Basically, it's the battle of the Hardy Boys, of who's the better Hardy, as Matt is taking on his brother Jeff in this next match. And Lita, she's calling this right down the middle. She's not going to lean towards Matt just because she had been dating Matt. So just because she had been dating Matt, you'd think she'd be leaning towards Matt in this match, but no. She said she was going to call this right down the middle. And Lita does a good job refereeing this match. Jeff Hardy ends up defeating his brother Matt on this show, so it is what it is. Not one of Jeff and Matt's best matches against one another. Jeff and Matt would end up having better matches against each other as later down in the line in their careers, like in 2009 and 2015 or 2016 stuff. Yeah, but this was their very first match against one another, so it is what it is. Like, Jeff ends up beating Matt, so it is what it is, and Matt was really upset. I mean, Lita didn't see Matt's foot on the rope, and I mean, all she did was see the shoulders down, and it is what it is. Next up, we don't really get a really good match with this next match. We got the Dudley Boys, Bubba Ray and Devon Dudley, with the Duchess of Dudleyville herself, Stacy Keibler, defeating the Big Show and Kane to retain the the World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Championships. Now, the Dudley Boys end up retaining, and this match really wasn't the best match. I mean, yeah, Big Show and Kane would later go on to win Tag Team Gold with each other, but this was their very first time teaming up with each other, and this was not a good first outing for them. I mean, they would reform in 2005 and win the World Tag Team titles, and they would reform again and yet again win Tag Team Gold, but this was not like their best outing as a tag team, so it was what it was. Alright. Next up, we get, for the WWF Hardcore Championship, my man, The Undertaker, takes on Rob Van Dam. For the WWF Hardcore Championship. And Undertaker, and yes, this was made into a Hardcore Championship match on Heat. I mean, for weeks, Undertaker had been demanding respect. Basically, by this point, Undertaker had turned heel at the end of 2001, and he's cut his hair shorter. He's now he's going into his whole big evil persona, this was like the beginning of what we were going to see for 2002 and 2003 with him being big evil. And this was like just the big start of it. And Taker and Van Dam ended up having a great match for the Hardcore Championship. It was a solid outing, and and Taker and Van Dam, this was their only one-on-one matchup. It was their only one-on-one matchup, but it was a good one-on-one matchup. I mean, we'd see what they could use. They were brawling throughout the crowd. We saw weapons be thrown into play. Van Dam used a chair. He tried to hit a Van Daminator on the stage, but Undertaker ducked it. Then he chokeslammed Van Dam off the stage. Then went in for the 1-2-3 and captured the Hardcore Championship. So Undertaker is now the new WWF Hardcore Champion. So next up, we get Trish Stratus, retaining the World Wrestling Federation Women's Championship to defeat Jacqueline in a decent match. Not good, not great, but it's just an overall decent match. And now we get into it. We're about to get into it. 4 men, 3 matches, 2 titles, 1 undisputed champion at Vengeance. So you have 2 title matches, and then 1 match to crown the undisputed champion. First up, you have Stone Cold Steve Austin taking on Kurt Angle for the WWF Championship. Now, Austin is the WWF champion. Vince McMahon, he tried to strip Austin of the WWF Championship after Survivor Series and tries to give it to Kurt Angle. But Ric Flair wouldn't have any of this, And so, originally, Ric Flair just wanted to have Austin and Rock have a unification match, but instead, Vince says, I have a better idea. What if Stone Cold defend the title against Kurt Angle, and The Rock defends the world title against Y2J, and then on the same night, the winners of both matches go on to face each other for the undisputed WWF Championship. So now we get to Austin and Angle, and they have a great match here. Now, it was not as good as their SummerSlam or their freaking Unforgiven match, but it was a solid match between Austin and Angle. If I gotta put Austin and Angle on the list of most underrated wrestling rivalries, I would definitely put Austin and Angle here. They ended up having a great match here, and it was just a good match overall. Austin ended up winning, and he got the victory. He retained the WWF title from Kurt Angle. So, it is what it is. And now we get to our second match of the whole 4 men, 3 matches, 2 titles, 1 undisputed champion thing that they were doing to crown their first ever undisputed champion, as Chris Jericho defeats The Rock to yet again capture the world title. No longer is it called the WCW world title because they no longer call it the WCW world title due to the fact that the Alliance was beaten at Survivor Series. Now it's just called the world title. So now Chris Jericho and The Rock, and yet again, another underrated series of matches that Rock and Jericho had throughout the early 2000s. They definitely had some underrated matches. They had that great match at No Mercy. This was another good match between them. And yes, they would even have another great match at the Royal Rumble a month later in January of 2002. So it was what it was. It was a very, very, very good match. Jericho ended up winning, and Vince McMahon came out to cost The Rock the title because he didn't want Rock to win, because of course Vince basically still has hard feelings because Rock humiliated him on SmackDown. Of course, Vince would cost The Rock this match. But otherwise, Jericho winning made sense. So now we come to the final match of the night in San Diego. Austin and Jericho. But right before the match could start, Kurt Angle attacks Austin, and then The Rock assaults Chris Jericho with a rock bottom, and then Rock ends up chasing Kurt Angle down, and then the match between Austin and Jericho gets underway. They both get up after being assaulted, and it's an alright match. It wasn't as good as the previous 2 matches, but it was just alright for a main event. It ends when Austin gets nailed in the back of the head with the belt by Booker T, who comes out from the crowd, and also Vince McMahon and Ric Flair get involved. Like, Vince comes out, and then Ric Flair came out, and then Vince beats up Ric Flair, and then Austin beats up Vince. And then we get back to Jericho and Austin has Jericho with a one-legged Boston Crab, but the referee didn't see it. But instead, Austin gets nailed in the back of the head with a belt by Booker T. And JR's like, Booker T does not work here. Well, apparently now he does, JR. Apparently now he does. So Booker T retreats through the crowd after assaulting Austin. Jericho ends up pinning Austin to become the first ever undisputed champion, and he's holding up both belts. And like Vince said, he who laughs last laughs loudest. And Vince got the last laugh on this show. And the whole thing with Booker T and Austin would lead into the big supermarket brawl that we would see later that month on SmackDown. So honestly, yeah, Vengeance 2001. It was a decent show. Not a bad show, but very decent. Anyway, this has been your Digital Super Saiyan 3, and I will see my wrestling faithful in January as I tackle WCW Sold Out 1998. See ya!